Stand by.
Kenmore City Council is now in session. The clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember File,
Present.
Mayor Baker,
Here.
Councilmember O'Kane. We'll come back to Councilmember O'Kane. She was here, and let me check. Oh, there we are. Let's go ahead and get her from the holding tank. Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Here.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Here.
Councilmember Kugler,
Here.
Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Councilmember O'Kane.
Here.
All present.
Wonderful. Wonderful. All right, this is a special meeting. It's a study session. So we're only talking about what's on the agenda. So first item on the agenda is a report and discussion on exceptional trees presented by policy analyst intern Garett Oppenheim. And Garett, let me just say something. I'm very impressed with your work. You did both, and somebody's taught you well. You've done a very, very good job and quite thorough. And I really appreciate the effort. Thank you very much. And I'm sure the council does too. So,
well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
All right. Report and discussion on exceptional trees.
Well, good evening, council members. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Good evening, council members, Kenmore residents, and anyone else around the world joining the feed tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to present on this topic of tree preservation. At the City Council meeting on April 19th, 2021, Brian Hampson and Samantha Loyuk presented a summary of Kenmore's tree regulations, including potential code amendments to further protect, preserve, and enhance Kenmore's urban forest. The presentation included a list of short-term and long-term action items labeled Lists 1 and List 2. List 1, as seen here, was composed of 5 recommendations that could be accomplished this year, including changing the definition of significant tree so that it includes smaller diameter at breast height trees, revising tree retention requirements so that certain nuisance trees like cottonwoods and alders do not receive credit for retention, codifying the tree removal application process for existing family residences, updating the removal penalty language for consistency, and making tree removal permits valid for a shorter period of time so that replacement trees get into the ground faster. List 2 was composed of more long-term items and consisted of increasing the tree density requirement for new development, decreasing yearly allowances for single-family tree removal, always requiring replacement of removed trees, establishing maximum floor area ratios to limit the size of single-family residences, establishing an exceptional tree program, and creating a tree fund for instances where replacement is infeasible that would potentially include a tree rebate program for planting trees on single-family lots. I was hired to research the final 2 items, draft policy papers on each, and make this presentation to the council. Additionally, on July 29th, Senior Planner Samantha Loyuk submitted a proposal to King Conservation District to reassess the city's tree canopy and set up a tree giveaway. On September 7th, the Urban Forestry Working Group preliminarily decided to fund a giveaway event in Kenmore next year. Big trees are invaluable to the environment. The big trees native to the Pacific Northwest, like Douglas firs, western hemlocks, and western red cedars, are the best in the world at storing carbon, and they actually get better at doing it as they age and grow bigger. In fact, according to the US Geological Survey, some large trees seem to add the carbon mass equivalent of an entire smaller tree each year. Beyond helping fight climate change by removing greenhouse gases from the atmosphere and storing them, trees provide myriad benefits to our health, environment, and society. Large trees increase property values, lower energy costs, clean local water, and even lead to better health outcomes for people. And yet, despite the benefit trees, and in particular big trees, provide, the United States lost about 175,000 acres of tree cover, about 36 million trees per year from urban and community areas between 2009 and 2014. In that same period, Washington State lost 3,350 acres per year of urban and community tree cover. And so I was asked to research 2 policy options to preserve large trees and expand the canopy beyond what Kenmore already had planned. Those policies are exceptional tree ordinances and residential tree subsidies. I'm not going to do an overview of the tree protections currently in place in Kenmore because Samantha Loyuk did such a splendid job of that for the council back in the spring. But I'll begin this presentation talking about exceptional tree ordinances, and I'll move on to tree subsidy programs in the second half. So what are exceptional trees? Well, in order to preserve more trees, some cities have implemented versions of an exceptional tree ordinance. There are 2 primary ways cities protect trees. Most list out in their municipal codes the species they're protecting and the size threshold at which they become protected. Other cities like Redmond and Bonnie Lake protect all large trees. In both of those cities, it's any tree over 30 inches in diameter. The risk with a scheme like that is that many trees you might want to protect never reach 30 inches, which is why Seattle protects as exceptional many species as small as 6 and 8 inches in diameter. And generally, the protection extended to these exceptional trees is a prohibition from removing them. But even in cities with strong protections for exceptional trees, an ordinance like this is far from a perfect solution. And in every city that has implemented an exceptional tree ordinance of some kind, there are always exceptions to the rule, and big trees still come down. Now in Kenmore, you might want to limit the exceptions in order to protect the most possible trees, but some are unavoidable. The primary exception to the exceptional tree ordinance that all cities provide for is to allow for the removal of exceptional trees when so is necessary to allow for the reasonable use of property. This exception derives from the US Supreme Court's understanding of the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution, which, among other things, bars the taking of private property for public use without just compensation. Another unavoidable exception is for dead, dying, and hazardous trees. Such trees must be removed to provide for the public welfare and guard against injuries and property destruction. Finally, many cities have allowances in place, like Kenmore, for homeowners to remove a specified number of trees each year. And they often do not distinguish between exceptional trees and non-exceptional trees. To get the most effectiveness out of an exceptional tree ordinance, changing the number of trees residents can remove from their property would also be necessary. Mitigation requirements are one method to limit the effects of large trees still being removed, but it's important to bear in mind that replacement trees will be smaller and take many years to reach maturity and themselves become exceptional trees. The number of replacement trees cities require varies drastically and can make removal of exceptional trees burdensome even when an exception applies. For instance, Bonnie Lake requires 9 replacement trees in exchange for removing 1 exceptional tree. Mercer Island requires 6, and Woodway requires at least 5. At the other end of the spectrum, Redmond requires only a single replacement tree. Like mitigation, penalties for removing exceptional trees without authorization can make doing so quite burdensome. Many cities only require mitigation for violations of the ordinance, though the number of trees that must be planted does make this an expensive proposition. Others have enacted fines that can be quite formidable. Lake Forest Park, Duval, and Woodway all fine a violator the appraised value of the tree, which can run into the thousands of dollars. Mercer Island fines up to triple the appraised value. In North Bend, the fine is $10,000 per violation, and Bainbridge Island fines $25,000. In terms of effectiveness, every city that has implemented one of these ordinances has done so with similar goals in mind to Kenmore, namely the preservation of large trees and maintaining and increasing the tree canopy. Subsidiary goals cited by program administrators include preventing clear cutting by developers, increasing home values, and preserving the Sylvan Northwest characteristics of the region. Now, most of the cities who have implemented exceptional tree ordinances have done so in the last 5 years, so it's still too soon to say whether they have effectively protected more trees than they did in the past. In terms of the impact on development in a city, Mercer Island saw developers leave in the aftermath of the ordinance, although they did return once they figured out how to work with it. In Lake Forest Park, they actually increased the size thresholds for trees to be protected compared to those in Seattle in order to not have a negative impact on development. In terms of staff time, resources are required to administer the exceptional tree ordinances in every city that has implemented them. These ordinances are not easy to draft, and there is an especially large cost in staff time upfront in research and writing. Administrators talked about having to spend time consulting with arborists to determine what tree species to protect and what the appropriate sizes would be. They spent significant amounts of time researching the ordinances other cities had passed before them to determine what would work for them and what would not. The administrator of Ridgefield's Heritage Tree Ordinance estimated that it took at least 40 hours of staff time to set up and draft their ordinance, one that has not even been particularly effective at protecting large trees. In Woodway, it took 3 months of full-time work to develop and craft the ordinance before taking it to the City Council. And now for my recommendation with regard to exceptional tree ordinances. After consultation with relevant staff, I recommend that the exceptional tree ordinance be considered in the context of the Climate Action Plan and the long list of potential new programs that will likely result from it, as well as the List 1 regulations that will be implemented this fall. An exceptional tree ordinance is not something that can be easily thrown together. It's going to require significant staff time and major decisions by the council as to what trees to protect, what behavior to allow, exceptions, mitigation requirements, and penalties. Even if all of that occurs, an exceptional tree ordinance is still just one tool in the regulatory toolbox. It's not a panacea. Large trees will still be removed in Kenmore. So moving on to part 2, residential tree subsidy programs. For the purposes of this report, I examined 10 tree subsidy programs, 5 in Washington and 5 elsewhere in the country.
You know, before you get on that one,
Yes.
Garrett, let's stop because you're starting section B.
Mhm.
So let's see if we got questions with section A.
Certainly.
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
First off, I'll agree with what the mayor said earlier. These are really thorough and were a really interesting read. How does one assess the value of a tree after it's been cut, though? I mean, you mentioned that briefly earlier, but, you know, are there best practices? How does one value a tree? Because it's more than just, I mean, as you said earlier at the beginning of the report, you know, the public good they provide is broad, you know, to put it lightly. The amount that it affects the property value could, you know, is a separate thing. So how do you get to a value for what a tree is worth after it's been cut?
My understanding of how they do that is that they go to certified arborists who have some standard method that they use to value trees. I believe Samantha Loyuk is here and she might be able to give us a better explanation of that. But beyond that, I'm not certain.
I'm promoting Samantha
Okay.
right now.
I think I just got added as a panelist. So this is Samantha Loyuk. You guys know me, I'm a planner, also an arborist. So yeah, the ISA does have a standard, their best management practices for tree evaluation. And so there's like a particular course that you would take and it looks at a lot of different things. And it can be done after the tree is removed. It's just assessing what was that value of that tree based on its condition and its size and species.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councilmember File.
Thank you. I believe there's actually a tree calculator, a tree value calculator. It's called a tree plantation calculator. And normally it's the height times the diameter. And then depending on the associated word cost. I see that's very commonly used. Just putting that out there for Deputy Mayor Herbeck. And I just want to add my thought. You had said it's great to, or a good idea to fold this into a climate action plan. I'm really concerned that with a developing climate action plan, this would just get lost. I'd rather have any work we are doing on tree canopy to say in a happy little envelope of tree canopy and associated ordinances and whatnot. That's just my opinion. I think that's straightforward for a community, and I certainly can understand later if it was under an umbrella of a climate action plan.
Councilmember Marshall. I'm sorry, Councilmember Kugler. You'll be next. Councilmember Marshall.
And a little bit of follow-up from council members Herbig and File. Samantha, does measurement or valuation of the board feet have any part in the valuation of the trees? I know in a strict commercial sense, timber species can be valued like that. Does that go into this? I guess this would be a residential, or this does it go into this type of valuation?
So the factors are size, species, condition, and location.
Not board feet. Then doesn't sound like a commercial valuation. Okay.
No, it's not. It's called the ISA Tree Valuation Guide.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Kugler.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. I have a question about Garrett. First off, thank you so much for doing this research. It was very comprehensive and very informative. I was wondering if you came across any cities without exceptional tree ordinances, and if you asked them why they don't have one, or if there were any instances where they had one but removed it. Did that come across in your research?
No, I didn't. I mean, almost no cities have them. I think these are the only 11 cities in the state that do. I did not come across any that had them and got rid of them. So I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we move on? Yes, Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, this may be a little bit similar to Councilmember Herbig's question. In terms of the replacement ratios, there's wide variability, and I'm just wondering kind of, so you have a big tree, and of course they vary in how big they're going to be. When they're removed, is there an actual kind of carbon ratio that an argument could be made of, like you take down a tree that is X diameter and therefore and Y height, and that's an equivalent of 5 little guys. I'm curious if there's any standard ratios like that.
None of the cities do it like that in terms of the carbon displacement. It's more just in terms of they have size thresholds that they've determined that this is what you have to put in the ground to make up for what you took out. And it's never going to equal what you took out. It's always going to be, you're putting in smaller trees that will hopefully grow to be larger trees. And in some cities, Mercer Island, for instance, when they give you like a development permit to go build, that permit looks forward 5 years. And so you're not allowed to, to remove trees for the next 5 years. And they're going to come back and check and make sure that what was there is still there.
Great, thank you. And I echo everybody saying this is great work.
Thank you.
So we've just recently had some rather significant trees cut down, 200 feet tall, probably 3-4 foot in diameter in some cases. Looking at replacement policies, are we limited to the 1 and 2 inch 1 and 2 inch size diameter sizes that we so often see? And I realize you don't have answers, but you certainly have picked up some of this in your preparation.
Yeah, for sure. I think you guys can put into place any rules that you want, but finding larger trees, it can be difficult. Like, quite frankly, I don't think that you can't go down to Home Depot and get anything much bigger than that, right?
Right.
And that's kind of what they're limited to, is what nurseries can give them. So it's hard to move bigger trees. So yeah, for the most part, you do have to put in smaller trees to replace the bigger ones that get taken out.
Deputy Mayor.
Following up on what you were just talking about with Mercer Island and their 5-year kind of follow-up, what's to stop somebody after, in year 6 from cutting the trees? I assume that they wouldn't be significant at that point, being all of 5.5, 6 years old. Is there anything stopping somebody from cutting down those trees in year 6?
I see that Samantha's hand is up. I'm not sure if it's to answer this one.
Samantha?
I should unmute. Sorry. When it's related to a development, we have a bond process in place it's for 3 years. And then beyond that, it's recorded on the plat map that says this development includes a tree management plan that's on file with the city. And it usually gives the permit number. And it says like all lots have to comply with the tree management plan. And so when people come in like 6 years later, we would pull the tree management plan, and we've done this for old plats too. And we would say, okay, that tree you're proposing to remove was actually, it was designated for protection as part of the development. So you can't, it's a protected tree. And the only way they would be able to remove it would be to, if it were hazardous and you would have replacement, or if you were somehow revising the tree management plan, so you're still making up all those tree units, which is not something that they usually do.
Okay, thank you.
But we can have whatever we decide replacement trees should be.
Absolutely.
All right, any other questions? We're ready to move on. All right, let's go to section B, residential tree subsidy programs report and
Okay.
discuss.
Great. So as I was saying, I reviewed 10 programs from around the country, 5 in Washington, in Seattle, Kirkland, Lake Forest Park, Tacoma, and Vancouver, and then 5 outside of Washington just to get a wider scope. Those were Arlington County, Virginia, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Lima, Ohio, Louisville, Kentucky, and Riverside, California. And unlike the exceptional tree ordinances where I got an exhaustive view of everything in Washington, this is hardly exhaustive. There are many more programs around the country, but I wanted to limit myself to 10 because these did a good job of demonstrating the diversity of such programs in terms of their models, their funding, and their operations. What I discovered is that there are 3 models of subsidy program. There are giveaways, rebates, and vouchers. Giveaway programs are the model favored by King Conservation District, and it's the model that Samantha proposed in her grant application to the King Conservation District. They're exactly what they sound like. A city or its partner organization buys up a bunch of trees, and then they give them away to eligible residents who request them. But even in this model, there are differences in how they operate. Let's see, Seattle, Fort Lauderdale, and Arlington County all operate programs like this. The director of the Seattle Trees for Neighborhoods program buys 1,000 trees a year, which he breaks up into about a third are small, a third medium, and a third large trees. And residents can then apply for up to 4 trees a year, and they get to select from whatever's available. There are always more applicants than trees, so not everyone who wants trees can get them. Seattle partners with a contractor who is currently the University of Washington at a cost of about $50,000 per year to distribute the trees to program participants who are then responsible for planting them. In Arlington County, they work with a local nonprofit called Eco Action, which selects 10 tree species to make available each year. All property owners in the county are eligible for the program, and they apply online for the type of tree they want. During planting season, Eco Action's contractor delivers the trees to program participants, and unlike Seattle, they also plant them for the participants. Fort Lauderdale orders excess trees from its city tree supplier beyond what the city needs, and then makes some of them available to residents. Unlike the other giveaway programs, Fort Lauderdale does not deliver them to people. They hold 2 events each year at a specific location where residents can come by and pick up trees for themselves and take them home to plant. Let's see. So I will review the rebate and voucher models more quickly because Samantha specified in the proposal to KCD that we would run a giveaway program in Kenmore. But rebate programs are used in Kirkland, Lima, Riverside, and Vancouver, working on the principle that residents go to a nursery and buy the trees they want, usually from a list of eligible species, and then apply to the program. If they meet all of the program's eligibility requirements, the most common of which are residency, acceptable species, and actually planting the trees, then the city sends them a rebate check. One program administrator did point out the equity issues involved with rebate programs in that they favor people who have the resources to expend their money in the first place to make the initial purchase. and that his city intends to switch over, at least in part, to a voucher model going forward. The voucher model, which is used in Linwood, Tacoma, and Riverside, as opposed to the rebate model, which requires participants to buy the tree first and then be reimbursed, voucher models require participants to first apply for the voucher, and then when they have been accepted into the program, they take it to a nursery and buy their trees. Riverside is slightly different from the others in that their energy utility company sends a voucher to all of its customers every year to get a single 5-gallon tree for free. I don't know if that's the primary reason, but Riverside does plant by far the most trees of any of the programs I examined each year at about 12,000. So in terms of funding, tree subsidy programs have 3 primary means. Grants provide the funding for the programs in Kirkland and Louisville, and those top out around $20,000 a year. Fees associated with tree removal and tree code violations fund the expensive giveaway programs in Fort Lauderdale and Arlington County, which cost about $50,000 and $250,000 each year, respectively. And utilities provide the bulk of the funding for Seattle's giveaway program and Tacoma's voucher program. In terms of staff time, these programs can be major burdens to staff, requiring significant amounts of time, beginning with the program setup. It takes time and resources to determine all the details of operation, to find partners, and to select and order the trees. Giveaway programs, such as that which Samantha has proposed to KCD, tend to require the largest commitment of staff time. Arlington County requires 5 to 10 hours a week, with more needed during the busy season when applications are being submitted. And Fort Lauderdale's giveaway program takes up to 240 hours of staff time each year for the 2 big events, and then added time for their smaller ad hoc mini giveaways. In Seattle, the Trees for Neighborhoods program has 1 employee who spends approximately 80% of his time over the course of the year on the project. And from June to November, he's very busy, working overtime and weekends. Rebate programs, on the other hand, take up to 5 hours a week of staff time, primarily reviewing applications and mailing out rebate checks. And voucher programs can take about 12 hours a week during the peak of the season. Partnerships can be a key means by which to operate programs like these. One name that came up multiple times during the course of my research was the Arbor Day Foundation and their Community Canopy program. Arbor Day Foundation works with cities to set up giveaway programs. They use interactive technology to help homeowners find the most strategic place in their yards to plant trees in order to save money and energy to help the environment. Pricing for the program is based on the trees the city chooses to give away and can range from $35 to $60 for those given out events to $40 to $50 for trees mailed to program participants. The per tree cost includes not just the trees, but also delivery, licensing of the software, creation of the city's program's website, access to reporting and metrics, and program staff support. On their website, they offer demonstrations for those cities that might be interested in partnering with them. I also came across an interesting nonprofit located in Bonnie Lake called Beautify Bonnie Lake, founded by a church group there with the goal of working with the city to enhance its beauty and giving citizens a chance to create permanent and positive improvements to the city. They don't focus on tree planting, but it is one of the activities they engage in. And their chairperson, Todd Dale, a member of the Bonnie Lake City Council, offered an invitation to Kenmore City Council to visit Bonnie Lake during one of their events to see the work firsthand, or to attend a board meeting to discuss what it takes to start a similar organization if Kenmore were so inclined. He also suggested a willingness to come before the Kenmore City Council to talk about their work. Finally, my recommendation with regard to a tree subsidy program, arrived at after consulting with the relevant staff, is in light of the fact that there is no longer time to set up a tree giveaway program before the start of the 2021 planting season, and the likelihood that KCD will fund such a program in 2022 based on Samantha's proposal. Kenmore should use the KCD funds to operate a pilot program giveaway next year for the 2022 planting season. After the 2022 giveaway program concludes, staff can evaluate the program in terms of staff time and resources that it would need to become a permanent and ongoing program. Furthermore, like a potential exceptional tree ordinance, the establishment of a tree giveaway or subsidy program should be considered in the context of the work plan dockets for future years and the recommendations that will come out of the Climate Action Plan, which will likely produce a long list of potential new programs. So thank you to the City Council members for your attention tonight. Thank you to City Manager Rob Carlindsey for bringing me on for this assignment. And thank you for city staff for your support in putting this together, and all of the other city staffs who helped me in my research. If there's any other questions, I will do my best to answer them now.
Questions? Well, You did such a thorough job, Garrett. I don't see any questions. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Samantha, thank you for joining.
No
Appreciate-
problem. Good to see you.
Good to see you. So, seeing as how we seem to be done, and that's the last item on the agenda. So, we are adjourned. Thank you all. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Not
Good
everyone.
night.
Thank you for the great meeting.
Good evening.